The Orkney Earldom Feud. How cousins turned the Viking stronghold of Orkney into a battlefield of betrayal, vengeance, and sainthood. Whispers in the north. The wind over Orkney carried many things. The cries of seabirds, the crash of waves, and the whispers of ambition. These islands, scattered like stepping stones between Norway and Scotland, were both gateway and prize. Whoever ruled Orkney ruled the sea lanes, the trade, and the honor of being Jarl at the edge of the world. But the sagas tell us that power here was never safe. It passed from father to son like a torch through a storm, always flickering, always at risk of being blown out by envy or betrayal. And in the 11th century, one feud would turn these islands into a cauldron of blood and vengeance. It began with brothers. It ended with a saint. Chapter 1, The Brothers' Legacy. Long before the feud, two brothers ruled Orkney. Thorfinn the Mighty, iron-handed and feared, and his gentler half-brother Brucey. Thorfinn carved his legacy with axe and fire, raiding the Scottish coast and bending chiefs to his will. Brucey preferred peace, holding his lands with quiet strength. But peace is a fragile inheritance. When Brucey died, his sons believed they were entitled to their share of Orkney. Thorfinn's heirs disagreed. Two lines of blood, two claims to power. The stage was set. And in Orkney, no dispute ended without blood. Cousins at war, Brucey's sons Paul and Erlind rose first. Together they claimed half the earldom. They were different as night and day, Paul cautious, Erlind generous, but together they were strong enough to balance Thorfinn's heirs. For a time it worked. The islands prospered, ships came heavy with trade, and the Jarls ruled side by side. But children grow and ambition grows sharper. Paul's son Hakon believed the islands were his by right. Erlend's sons, Magnus and Erlinger, were equally determined. And soon what had been rivalry hardened into hatred. The saga puts it simply. They quarreled often, and their quarrels grew sharper as they grew older. It was only a matter of time before words turned into war. Betrayal at the Althing. The first blow fell not in open battle but in betrayal. Earl Paul, Erlend's brother, was seized during a supposed meeting of peace. The saga is blunt. He was taken by guile. His followers abandoned him and he was led away in chains. His power dissolved like mist in the sun. When word spread, the islands shuddered. If an earl could be betrayed at the very assembly meant for justice, what safety was left? But this was only the beginning. The younger generation, Hakon, Magnus, Erlinger, were sharpening their blades, and Orkney was bracing for the storm. The rise of Hakon. Hakon Paulson seized the moment. Supported by the Norwegian crown, he claimed the earldom. His ships patrolled the seas, his warriors seized land, and his enemies were crushed or exiled. But Hakon ruled with iron and cruelty. Those who defied him were cut down in their halls, their kin outlawed. Chiefs who had sworn loyalty to Erlend's sons now found themselves fugitives. The saga whispers of his pride, of his hunger for power. And pride in the Viking world was always the first step toward doom. Yet no one could challenge him, except one man, Magnus the reluctant warrior. Enter Magnus Erlendsson, son of Earl Erlend. He was unlike the others. While cousins boasted of raids, Magnus refused to fight. On one Viking voyage, when men plundered and burned, Magnus stayed aboard the ship singing psalms. He was mocked as weak, called the Holy Fool. But those who knew him saw something else, courage of a different kind. The courage to stand against the tide of vengeance. In a land ruled by axe and honor, Magnus chose peace. That choice would make him a legend and a target. The gathering storm. Years of tension broke into open war. Hakon on one side, Magnus on the other. Armies gathered, banners unfurled, longships painted with dragon heads slid into the sea. The saga describes the fields of Orkney echoing with war cries, families divided, and the land scorched. The feud was no longer just about inheritance, it was about survival. And yet, even as warriors sharpened their blades, a strange thing happened. Both sides grew weary. The islands had bled too much. So a meeting was called. Peace, they said. Let there be peace. The fatal meeting at Egilsay. The chosen place was Egilsay, a small island of green fields and low hills. The terms were clear. Each side would bring only a few ships, a token force. They would speak, agree, and end the feud. Magnus arrived in good faith with just 2 ships. He prayed as he came ashore, still believing peace was possible. Then he saw the horizon. Ship after ship darkened the sea. Hakon's fleet far larger than promised. The trap was sprung. Magnus did not flee. He told his men, "Go and save yourselves. I will not bring death upon you for my sake." He stood alone when Hakon's warriors came. The death of Magnus. Magnus was captured and brought before his cousin. The saga tells us Hakon's men urged him to kill Magnus at once, to end the threat. But even Hakon hesitated. Magnus was beloved by the people, and killing him would bring curses. A compromise was suggested. Blind him, maim him, drive him from Orkney. But Hakon's pride would not allow half measures. The feud demanded blood. On the fields of Egilsay, Magnus Erlendsson knelt. He prayed for his killers, forgiving them. Then an axe fell, and the island's most unlikely hero was slain, not in battle but in betrayal. A saint in the north. They thought Magnus's death would end the feud. Instead, it began a legend. Soon tales spread. A heavenly light at his grave, cripples healed, the sick restored. Fishermen swore they saw Magnus walking on the shore, guiding them through storms. The people began to call him St. Magnus, and churches rose in his honor. Most famous of all was St. Magnus Cathedral in Kirkwall, a red sandstone giant that still stands today. Hakon, racked by guilt, even supported the building of Magnus's shrine. But his name would be remembered with bitterness, while Magnus's became a beacon. The feud's shadow. The Orkney Saga does not soften the lesson. The feud consumed fathers and sons, burned villages, and drowned the islands in blood. Yet out of that blood came something enduring. Not Hakon's power, not Paul's cunning, not Erlend's generosity, but Magnus's choice to stand for peace in a world of vengeance. The saga ends not with a throne but with a shrine, not with a victor's crown but with a martyr's halo. And even now, nearly 1,000 years later, the cathedral towers over Orkney's capital, its stones whispering the same question the feud asked. What matters more, power that dies or honor that endures? The lasting hook. The Orkney Earldom Feud was more than family rivalry. It was the Viking world itself at a crossroads, half pagan, half Christian, half bound by vengeance, half yearning for peace. In the end, the feud's true ending was not Magnus's death, but his sainthood. His story became Orkney's story, how violence could not last forever, how even in the blood-soaked north, a voice of conscience could echo louder than the clash of swords. And so the saga closes, not with silence but with bells. Bells ringing from a cathedral built for a man who chose peace.